Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first in this year's is Mentoring Mentor series. And today's topic is on time management while adapting to mentees' need. This, as I already mentioned, is the first webinar in this year's series. And we have developed this series based on the needs of the community. And I have the tremendous pleasure to introduce Dr. Ben Loke, who is currently a professor at the University of Florida in the Department of Computer and Information Sciences and Engineering. And he is also the director of the Virtual Experience Research Group. He co-founded the Shadow Health, and in 1929, I'm sorry, in 2019, I got the digit reversed. In 2019, he received the University of Florida Innovator of the Year award. I actually know Dr. Ben Loke for more than a decade, actually, maybe close to 2 decades. Dr. Loke also received NSF Career Awards in 2007, and he and his students in the virtual experience research group received several best paper awards, including those at ACM Interactive 3D Symposium and IEEE VR. Dr. Logue, and he received his PhD in computer science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill about 2 decades ago. Dr. Logue is internationally known for his, pioneering contributions and his work on human-centered computing, and has received extensive funding for his work. And so I'm going to pass the floor to him, and please take it away, Ben.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining. Happy Juneteenth for those who celebrate. Yeah, just a quick admin. Last name is going to be pronounced Locke. So pretty close. Pretty close. All right. I can please get sharing screen capabilities, and my preference would be for folks who definitely use the chat and ask questions, because I hope this is not a long 1 hour conversation or 1 hour presentation of me just talking aloud, because that would be, I think, not the most effective way to get this across. Okay, thank you so much. I got this. All right, hopefully you see my slides and everything's good. We can get started. Okay, so a little bit about me. Again, the main things I think folks might find valuable is, again, yes, I've been a computer science professor here at the University of Florida. It says chat is disabled. How can we use it? Maybe Lauren, if you could kind of investigate that as I do this quick intro. I think the interesting part for folks that I wanted to take a different track, because I think when people think about mentorship, one of the challenges is we probably had mentorship that might have worked for us because we made it through, right? A lot of us made it through the academic gauntlet, and we've got to where we are. And so therefore, the mentorship that we got really worked. But I thought about, hey, what are some different perspectives that we could talk about mentorship and maybe change the way we think about things? So if you're going to run into mentees who have different needs in terms of what mentorship might look for them, you might be able to have new tools in your tool belt to look at that. And the one place I want to really focus on is really my experience as an entrepreneur. So I'm both a computer science professor, but also an entrepreneur. I'm the chief technology officer at Rovex, which is a hospital robotics company here in Gainesville. And previously, I co-founded and was lead inventor of Shadow Health, which had a 10-year run and was acquired by Elsevier in 2020. So what this talk is really going to be about is trying to think about saying, hey, what lessons can we learn from the world of startups in terms of helping us mentor? Okay, Lauren, I've gone full screen on my side. Hopefully everything looks okay to everybody else. If not,
yep, and chat is working.
Beautiful. Okay, cool. So just a bit about me. So again, my name is Ben. I'm at the University of Florida, and people often ask, are there actually gators on campus? And the answer is yes, there are lots of gators on campus. And they said, isn't that dangerous? I go, well, humans are stupid. That's why, gators are not dangerous. You just have to leave them alone, but there are plenty of gators. So if you want to see a lot of gators, come down to Gainesville. A bit about my family. I've got 3 teenagers. And so that we were in New Zealand last summer. So I've got that. And I'm a big animal person. We've got 3 dogs. And just like my kids, we've got 3 dogs and 3 kids, and usually 2 out of the 3 like each other, and that changes every single day, which 2 that is. A bit about me as a researcher. I'm an HCI virtual reality researcher, and I actually took Dr. Lin's first class at UNC when she moved there. I believe it was 2001. So I was one of your students. I did not stand out in your class in any way, but I did take your class way back when. I do run a research group called the Virtual Experiences Research Group. Here at the University of Florida, we've got a group of about 10 to 12 students, undergrads plus graduate students plus postdocs. Again, I did do some startups, Shadow Health, which again was for 10 years, and then I exited the company, and I'm now CTO of a 6-person company called Rovex, which is in hospital robotics. And I'm going to try to bring in the lessons that I've learned from the startup world to hopefully teach us some things about some insights into how to adapt to mentees' needs. So again, what I would like to do is talk for maybe a couple minutes, but then really have an opportunity for folks to put in questions so that this is valuable to you. So the way I think about things from a startup perspective is resources are scarce. So we have to make it effective. So just like your time here is very important to you, I'm going to make sure this is valuable to you. So I want to really give us at least 1 minute here for folks to be able to put in what your most pressing challenges are with mentees' needs and time management. So if you can put them inside the chat, hopefully as this thing pops up, I'm going to try to refer to them in real time and or try to theme them. If lots of things come in, I'll try to use AI to theme them as we go through this. So I'll put 30 seconds, but I'd love for people to think about what are the things you're struggling with, because I want everybody to come out of this talk with at least one thing that they can apply to hopefully make your mentorship strategies better. Right, Yancy, thank you. I hope I said your name correctly, but yes, that's a good question. All right. Again, folks want to continue adding stuff to the chat. I'm happy to continue to take more feedback in. And I do hope that you use this chat throughout this, because again, the goal of this is for you to come away with something useful. And if you sit back to this lecture, I suspect like many of my online teaching experiences, it's going to be tough for folks to stay very engaged. All right. I love these terms about time, about anxiety, unexpected requests. I think that these are all things we wanted to really chat about. Handholding, providing a lot of guidance, allowing mentees to figure things out on their own. Yes, I think these are all things. And thinking about how you can have mentees at different stages, right? I think one thing most of us who have mentored for a long time will definitely understand, the needs of each mentee is going to be individualized. Just because what worked for one student, probably there's no guarantee that it'll work for others. Okay, right. Okay, so the goal of this meeting, and what I hope you get out of this, if you get nothing else out of this talk, by the end of at 4 p.m. Eastern time, hopefully you are thinking of these 2 questions and you're going to grind on them for the next 10 plus years of your life, because this is what I really did. I really thought about what am I working on and how am I spending my time? These are the 2 questions, and I think about these 2 questions every single day. And that's not an exaggeration at any point. The reason why I think this is really important is we need to really reconceptualize the way we think about what we work on and what we spend time on for us to really be able to mentor to a variety of different students. And the one thing that I want us to focus on is to really think about how valuable are we being to other people. And so I really want us to think about, again, what are you working on? How are you spending your time? Again, I think of these questions every single day on the drive in. Can I make it more efficient, more effective, with the focus on, am I being as valuable as I possibly can? And one way to think about this is ask yourself, and you should ask your students this too, what are you measuring? When you talk about the work that you're doing, how do you measure the work that you're doing? Is it the number of emails that you're answering? Is it the number of papers you graded, or the number of grant dollars you brought in? What are you measuring? And I think that if you start focusing on saying, well, what are the measures that are really important? It really helps you reverse engineer and think about, what am I working on and how do I want to spend my time? Okay, so one thing I want to highlight. So I used AI for some support here, but I asked it, create a word cloud for academia. So when you think about academia, what words naturally come to mind? And this is what ChatGPT helped me generate. And I don't think there are too many surprising things here, right? We see words like deadlines, midterms, finals, dissertation or defenses. I did have it focus on graduate work. So when you look at all these words, I want you to think about how work looks, and I want you to think of how time looks. Okay, so even think about like the concept of time. What's the scale of time we're talking about here? Right? They tend to be very large, right? A PhD is a very large time scale event, right, for most of us, right? Proposals take a long time. Exams, you spend a lot of time thinking about them. If you want to write for a conference or a journal, that could be many, many months, if not years. So the time scale is extremely large. Now, whenever I went through the world of startups, I also created a word cloud for what are words used for startups. And why, when I say startups, I really want us to focus on saying these are startups, by definition, have not many resources and have a pretty short, they call it a runway, or a short amount of time that they're going to exist. And unless they figure things out, the company is going to not exist anymore, right? It's going to run out of money and the resources are gone. So when you look at startups, look at the words that come up here. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the word pivot. I'm sure you've heard of MVP, or a minimum viable product. That's often a misunderstood term, but the concept being, how can we try to get feedback early on, iteration, prototyping. So if you think about what's the time scale of these terms, I think most of us would agree the time scale here is much shorter, right? You don't have 5 years as a startup. Typically, you don't usually have that much money to find out whether your idea is going to work. You have a very short amount of time, and if it isn't, you've got to iterate. And this is some of the concepts that I really want to think about. When you look at the academia mindset, which I've put on the left, and the startup mindset, which I put on the right, and you kind of compare them, if you think about work is about completing stuff in academia. You get a paper accepted, you got a grant funded, you've got, you passed your proposal, you complete your PhD. It's very much about completing things. Whereas the startup mindset, it's about iterating. It's about making yourself slightly better every single day. And hopefully that's going to be enough for you to be able to survive. And for mentorship and mentees, for a lot of mentees where the academic mindset already works really well, I say, keep on doing what you're doing. You've found what works for those students, fantastic, not a problem. But what I found through a variety of students, both in my research group, but also in the companies that I worked with, having another mindset that you can turn to is what I'm hoping you get out of this talk today. So when you look at work in startups, it's about iterating. When you look in academia, time is discretized, right? You've got a semester or a year, an academic calendar. You submit to a conference and you find out the results in 3 months. But if you look at the startup mindset, time is continuous. Things are always moving. You're never going to get these set milestones that get checked off, unless there's a slight thing around funding. But outside of that, most things are continuous in the startup world. And what happens in academia, and this is where I think to some of the questions about mentees who struggle with anxiety, the academia mindset really focuses on failing or passing. Failing, I'm going to put here with a capital F. I'm sure a lot of us have heard the term fail fast, and we all nod our heads, but it's not something academia really recognizes and embraces. And what I hope to convey in this talk is this concept of failing in a startup way, which is the lowercase f. I call it the lowercase f failing, which means it didn't work out, but that's totally okay. Let's iterate on it and make it better. So this would be an example would be to say, hey, my student came up with a study design. we tried it, it didn't work out, but I would love for that student to find out that this was not this might have been a flawed study design as early as possible so that they can iterate and create a better study design moving forward, as opposed to trying to get the perfect study design up front. Okay, so again, academia mindset, if you just think about just the scale is so large because we think about PhDs, grant proposals, qualifiers, research papers. These are all large scale things. And again, if you take nothing else from this talk as a tool for you to think about how to change your mentorship model, both for your students, but also maybe for yourself, is to really rethink about time and how much time you give yourself to do certain things. So this is the trailer version, and you might have heard some storming. It is storming here in Gainesville, Florida. So I apologize for any background noise. Hopefully AI is going to cancel most of that out. But the main thing to think about here is my suggestion for what a lot of these questions about anxiety or hand-holding or guiding them to study new subjects. The thing that a lot of students struggle with is they see these as huge bets. When I say bet, I actually mean that from a, like if you're going to go gamble money, right? So you are betting, but students are often betting with their time, with their emotion, with their energy. And most of the hesitancy a lot of students have and why they get stuck is that the bet's too big. And the one thing I've learned is if you can make the bet small by communicating often, we can actually get people to get unstuck and make a lot of progress, and sometimes in a shocking amount of time, which is pretty cool. And we're going to eventually focus that on two areas, on ideation and feedback. Okay, so again, the other concept to really get here is make the bet small for your students, and everything they do, decrease the size of the bet. Because if you can, more people are willing to take more risks, and they're able to not feel like they have to have everything perfect before they make any decisions. Okay, so let's focus on this question. What are you working on? I'm going to tell you a quick story about what happened to me and how I came to some of the things that I got here, because I didn't invent any of these things. Let me be very, very clear. I want to give proper attribution to where things are. So what happened was, again, in 2003, I started as an assistant professor here at the University of Florida. And I noticed by 2009, it was about 10 p.m. when I finished the emails for that day. And I don't know whether this resonates with people. If it does, maybe do a +1 in the talk where you feel by the end of that day, it feels just answering all the requests for you for that day. It was at the end of the day. Like I had no time to get ahead on anything. And it just felt, how is this possible? I'm not a lazy person. I don't think I'm a dumb person. I might not necessarily be smart, but I don't think I'm dumb. So how can it be that I'm working from early in the morning till very, very late, and I just couldn't get ahead? So I was able to watch a great video, and I'll send along through Lauren all the links and all the resources I'm going to talk about. We'll provide that as an email, so you'll have that. You don't have to record any of these. You don't have to try to write any of these things down. They'll all be sent to you. But I saw this great video. Yeah, Raj, it really got me struggling because then I had just been promoted to associate. I'm like, is this what my life is going to be like for the next 20-something years? That kind of scared me. I don't want to do this for 20 years where you're just working till 10 p.m. and you just feel like you can't catch up and you feel like you're letting people down. So I saw this video by time management by the late Randy Pouch, who also did the last lecture. Both those lectures are really great for you to watch. And he introduced me to something called the Eisenhower Matrix, which when I mentor junior faculty here at my university, they've often given me feedback as the most useful thing that they've gotten. And since about 2012, I've implemented the Eisenhower Matrix extremely religiously in my workplace. And since 2012, I've never had more than 10 emails in my inbox across all inboxes. And this includes my startup work, my UF work. It's not to show off, but it's really to try to highlight that it is possible to get there and to try to get ahead of things. Okay, so very, very simple. I want folks to now, this is a bit more interactive here. Eisenhower Matrix is a very simple 2x2 matrix. And if you're familiar with this, I think sometimes it's really good to just revisit the topic again and see whether you're internalizing the concepts. But if you see here, the top has got urgent and not urgent, right? So this is things that are urgent, these things are not urgent, and you've got this other axis, the y-axis is important and not important. if you were to think about what work do you have to get done first, which one of these quadrants would it be in? So, the options are 1, 2, 3, 4. So which of these quadrants would you, quadrant 1, this one's pretty straightforward, right? Right. It's urgent and important. Absolutely. This is this one's easy. Here's another one. Which are the ones that are the ones you should totally not do? Just avoid it completely. Okay. 4. Again, those two people don't struggle with, right? So I think most people agree, absolutely urgent, do that because it's important and the deadline is approaching. And everybody would also agree, not urgent and not important. That's really like, let's stop doing that, right? And for the most part, we actually do a pretty good job of this. We know when something's important and urgent, let's get it done. And we know sometimes we do things that are not urgent, not important, let's stop doing that. Yes, but yes, I'm glad that you're here too. This was the whole talk by Randy Pausch was, where is the next quadrant that you should spend your time on? And this is the mistake that most people, including myself, was making, of why I was working till very late into the night, seemingly every single day. What's the next, where should I prioritize the second quadrant worth of work? Again, this is the key component behind the whole Eisenhower matrix, which is why I was really, really struggling with things. And the answer is yes. The problem is we should be focusing on this quadrant number 2 or quadrant number 5. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about a 5th quadrant. Maybe is that everything? Probably not. But the answer we should focus on is the not urgent, but they're important. And we're going to go through some examples of this. The problem most people have, including myself, was I was doing this quadrant here, quadrant 3, things that were urgent, because I was so deadline driven that I was not taking any time to work on things that were farther out. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually try to run this through some examples. Should we consider how long responding will take? Nilufer, I apologize if I did not say your name properly, but should we also consider, yes, we're actually going to talk in the second part of this talk about how to rethink time, to rethink which quadrant we might put something in. So that's kind of making me spoil my own talk, but that's absolutely the next layer I want to talk about. But let's go ahead and just go through these examples. Let's do this first one. A mentee wants to talk with you after getting a poor exam grade. Which quadrant is that? So you get an email, your student says, I'm a first-year student, I've just joined your PhD group. I just took my first class and I did terrible. And that's what was me, because I did very terrible my first exam when I got to graduate school. I got a 35 out of 100. And I remember going, wow, I wonder what the class average was. The class average was 76. So I was very much there. I'm the mentor. I'm the mentor of the mentee. So that means somebody's coming to me, can be real thing, and bad grades can be devastating. Absolutely. So I would put this as a quadrant 1, right? This is urgent, and this is important. Okay. Now, if you take a look at, let's go to this next one. You're scrolling Twitter/X while on a Zoom call, which I know nobody here is doing because you're also tied into this talk. Okay, good. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. Clearly, that's a number 4, right? Which is to say, hey, I know this is wasting time. Let's cut this stuff off. So you're right, number 4. But let's talk about these next 2, because this is where we struggle with. Conference paper review due in 3 weeks. Yeah, it's a 2, right? It's important because you signed up to review a conference paper. It's presumably senior people in your field have asked you to do something and you said yes. And so now you're on the hook and you're like, okay, this is going to take me 2-3 hours to do. It's I don't have time today. I'll keep on pushing it off, keep on pushing it off. So what happens to quadrant 2 as time progresses? Well, thank you for coming to this talk. So, right, exactly. Kate, David, Hui Sun, that's exactly right. Number 2s become number 1s. And that's because that's the dangerous part, because when it becomes a number 1, you have to suddenly set aside a lot of time to do something and everything else gets blocked. Right? If the conference papers are due, the reviews are due today, that means you have to set aside those 2 to 3 hours today, or you're going to have to ask for an extension and all the other stuff. That's probably going to generate anxiety. It wouldn't generate anxiety in me. That's really, really difficult. Right? So the important thing is, the reason why we're running out of time is because we don't have time to work on number 2. It becomes quadrant 1, and then everything stops because we suddenly have to address this big bolus of needs. Yes, hey, I'm a video gamer. My kids quit playing Overcooked with me because I kept on yelling at them. So yes, if you play any sort of games and all of a sudden everything becomes late, that's a problem. The problem is that we also get a lot of number 3s that distract us. Like, your department chair wants slides in 3 hours. I know it sounds like, well, the department chair said they need it. I've got to produce this. The challenging part is that's really where, for your long-term development and growth, that's the time sink right there. That's really where you don't have the time to work on the urgent, on the not urgent important. You end up focusing a lot of time here. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. So the tough part that hopefully you're getting this, because this Eisenhower matrix works great with your students. When your students come in and they're struggling with how to spend their time, pull out this Eisenhower matrix and sit down with them and go, thing you're talking about, let's talk about this. Let's find out where you are on these quadrants. How have you been spending your time? Where do we need to put these priorities, and how can I help you put them in the appropriate quadrant? Because you will find that some of your students who are really struggling, they're actually mislabeling which quadrant this work falls in. They think everything is a 1 and 2. The reality is, you as a mentor can really help them develop the skills to evaluate when something is a 1 and a 2, and sometimes when it's really a 3. Because again, most people understand the 4s. The 4s are not hard, right? But the 3s are the ones people struggle with, especially new students. They go, oh, everything is super important because it's due coming up. And they've been trained that way. Right? In academia, they train you on deadlines. You have an assignment, it's due in 2 weeks. Therefore, everything's about deadlines. Remember what startups was about. Startups was about iterative improvement, and it's not about that. So let's take a look at this, helping a mentee map out their 1-year research plan. All right? That's really, again, that's a not urgent, but it's an important thing for them to work on. If you look at fixing a mentee's poster formatting 30 minutes before submission, what quadrant is that? So Raj, I would agree with you. It's a 3. If it got to that stage and it's 30 minutes out, it's not going to get fixed. There's something more systemic going on. And this is where somebody asked that when you let a student just sort of fail. This one's it's probably a minor fail because it's a poster format. I would make that a 3. It's just, and that's the difficulty part. And again, I'm not saying that anybody's quote unquote wrong. I'm just giving you my interpretation. So please don't feel like there's an answer key and people are going to get a grade of this. I just want to give you my tools that I've used over time just to help you, again, grow give you different perspectives of how to treat things. Right. So again, Arpita said, no, because they should have done it earlier. Absolutely. That to me is like, if they haven't, it's a more systemic issue. It should never become a 1, right? Okay, so reviewing your mentee's career goals and aligning projects, most of us would agree that's a 2. But how many times do we have that conversation with students? It's often, whenever there's a deadline of a paper coming up, when do we have time to talk to them about their career goals? It's very difficult unless we are super intentional about that, right? And so that's, again, where I want us to think about what quadrant people put in. Agreeing to give just a few slides for someone else's presentation due today. I think most people are starting to see the clue is everything comes with a deadline that's coming up, and it just generates a ton of anxiety in us. And that's exactly what I want us to get out of. Is if you operate in that space, you're going to be like me, where you're staying up till 10 p.m., answering the emails for that day because everything is a one, but it isn't. All right, so we talked about work, and the tool that I gave you was the Eisenhower matrix. That's named after President Eisenhower. It's been around for a long time. I didn't invent it. I was exposed to it by that beautiful YouTube video by Randy Pausch, and it changed my life. And I wanted to pass that on to you. But it really, once you start doing that, once you start applying the concept of the Eisenhower matrix, it brings in this really great concept of how are you spending your time? Because the reality is, this surprised me, but those of you who might be pre-tenure, when you get tenure, you do not get more time in your day. That was surprising to me. And I remember when Ming once told me, Ben, you thought you were busy as a PhD student. You're going to be even busier as an assistant professor. I told her, there's no way. And then she told me when I was assistant professor, I'd be even busier when I was an associate professor. I go, that's impossible. But she was right at every single stage, and it continues on. So you don't get more time. So how do we think about time, right? And the tip that I want you to be able to walk away from this talk is the concept of time boxing, which is to set a fixed short period for a task, and you can only work on that task during that time. And when that time is up, you assess progress and move on. What people have found who study this is that it actually enhances focus and productivity significantly. Some of you might have already been familiar with something called the Pomodoro technique. There are websites and little tomatoes you can buy on Amazon that pretty much set a 25-minute timer, and it goes off and you get 5 minutes to do something else, like browse Facebook or go do a bio break or whatever. So you've got this 25 on, 5 minute off. I don't know why, but it gives me like so some people, so I think for me, the important part about time boxing is it forces me to release my work at the end of that time. Find that doing with other people works though. Okay, very interesting. So the thing that I wanted to throw out there, I thought I would have more time with my now adult children. Now you're starting to get me scared, because with my 3 teenagers, that's what I'm hoping will happen, but it sounds like that is also not going to pan out. I use calendar to block my schedule for time boxing. Absolutely. So let's layer time boxing in with the idea of the Eisenhower matrix. So when the one thing to think about with time boxing, and this is the part that startups really embrace, but academia really struggles with, the goal of time boxing is you have to release at the end of that time, right? So that's going to be, and Kate, this actually goes to both your questions and what Rua brought up, which is when you time box something, the goal is to release the work that you're doing at the end of that time, not I'm just going to pause working. Okay, that's the important part, and that's the really critical. That's the startup world where you're never going to have enough resources to make the pretty everything. So you've got to be super surgical about what you're going to do, but you cannot let deadlines slip. You've got to release when the time is up, and let's get into that. All right, so just as a rule of thumb, I try to spend 80% of my day on the quadrant 1 urgent, important stuff, and then the 20% on the not urgent, important stuff. So I try to set aside in a hypothetical 8-hour academic day, 2 hours, I guess, 1 point something hours should be focused on tackling not urgent, but important things. Okay, so let's take a typical task that a lot of us might get tasked with. I've got to read a student's PhD dissertation for the defense in 2 weeks. How long would that take you? I just got one of my a colleague asked me to be on one. He's in the College of Education, and their student just sent me their dissertation about 5 days ago. It was 230 pages long, and I just, oh my word, that's a lot. Okay, so I've got to be at this defense in 2 weeks. I know I've got to read this 230-page document. That's going to take a long time. I'm a slow reader. I get distracted by everything. They don't actually read it. I actually read the words. I don't like signing off on something that I haven't read, to be honest with you. But whatever. let's continue on this. So, but if we want to think about this in terms of how do we break this down and make this thing more doable on shorter basis. So now the day I got the dissertation, so I've got 2 weeks left to do. What's something I could do for maybe 15, 20 minutes to help me more efficiently tackle that dissertation? Again, let's role play, you're me. You got this email that said you've got a dissertation defense in 2 weeks that you're going to be at, and you've got a 230-page document. And I only have 20 minutes that I can spend on it on this day. What can you do? Raj, that's going to be a common one. I'm going to try to break you of that one. Break it down like a paper. Check. Okay. So the first thing I did was I emailed the student and go, what parts have I already read in your proposal and your qualifier? Right? And he got back to me within 30 minutes. He goes, oh, you've actually already read chapters 1 through 3. The new sections are chapters 4 and 5. Now, that was still about 120 pages, but I'd already signed off on, but I signed off on that like a year and a half ago. I had no clue what I read a year and a half ago. Yeah, can you put this in the QA? How do you balance problem over product being part? So, yeah, I'm happy to jump back in and try to recover anything in the last few minutes. And I want to make sure I stay on time here. But really, the thing is, early on, I try to find ways to make it super efficient, right? So first thing I did was I emailed the student, what parts are new? What parts have I already checked off? Because I can't remember what I read. I'm on I think 24 PhD committees. I can't remember what this one student in another college wrote about. Then over time, the other things that I think about every day was which sections are going to matter to me for me to pass the student or have the most questions for the student. Because not every page is equally valuable, right? So again, I said I had about 120 pages left to read. Out of those 120 pages, which ones are the most valuable? And I would suggest to everybody that while we talk about PhD dissertations, hopefully you're seeing this concept of how am I spending my time for you and your students to really rethink the work that needs to really be done. Is every page equally valuable? I think most of us would agree. Where students struggle when they're writing their dissertation or the proposal or the literature review, not every page or not every word is equivalent. There are parts that are more valuable for you to give feedback on. And you're actually more valuable to the student if you can focus your energies on those areas. And then other places, I have, I turn on a voice assist and I just have it play in the car as I drive. So I got through 50 pages because I had to go run an errand today. And I just let it read to me the non-important pages. All right, so here's another example: tenure and promotion letter for a colleague. Hopefully, as you get through your career, you get asked to do this quite often. It means people care about your, they see you as somebody who can help junior faculty in your area. How can you be more valuable in a tenure promotion letter? Because again, this is very, very important. Typically, it's not urgent until it is urgent because the deadline's coming up. But you really want to help people. How do you do that? So again, the question is, how can you break down or how can you rethink the work to be done for tenure and promotion letters for a colleague? How can you rethink that work to be done so that you can be more valuable to people, but potentially be more effective with your time? Stephen, that's an interesting question. I don't like doing that because I like the letters to be mine. So I don't like, again, signing off on other folks. So what I do is I often email the chair, ask about what to highlight in the letter. Yes, because if you've been in tenure promotion meetings, you understand letters are there to give the faculty and especially the department chair ammunition or bullet points for them to include in their review of the candidate. So the goal is not to write a long letter. The goal is not to write a flowery letter. The goal is to write a letter to give people valuable comments that they can in turn cut and paste and use. Now, how can I I do that? What I often do is I email the chair and say, hey, what are some things that are very valuable in your understanding of your tenure promotion committee process? What are things that are very valuable that helps your candidates from their letters? Yes, was exactly right. So you can do that the first day you get the request for a tenure promotion letter. You can do some of these things the first day you get a request for a PhD dissertation. And what happens is all the stuff that you're putting here, which is this large, important thing, but it's not urgent today. But when it becomes urgent, if you haven't done any of this background research, it really, really becomes very, very hard. So what I try to do is I write my tenure promotion letter, draft number 1, which I time box to about 30 minutes. I usually do that 3 days after I get my letter request. And I just let it sit on there. And if I have more time to improve it over time, I actually go back and will improve the letter, give it 30 minutes. If I have that amount of time, I improve the letter based on things that I've learned. Maybe I spend time on the candidate's website. We'll go on their, read a paper of theirs, whatever it takes. But I iterate on my letter, and then whenever it's due, I can just submit it then. I'm releasing whatever I have, but I always have something that's at least somewhat valuable to the participant, to the candidate. So again, what I'm hoping you get out of this, what is this? The chair is one of the haters. You're not going to be doing. I mean, then you have only so much power as a letter writer. I'm just going to be honest. An interpersonal. Well, that's a good. Well, one question James, you might be raising a good question, which is, at some point there are certain things that you're just not going to be valuable. And at that point, I might decline being a letter writer. If that's really, I don't need to spend my time. I want to support junior faculty. And if that's the case, and I don't think I can really do anything against what this candidate is, I would rather reach out to the candidate and say, right, the chair hates faculty. So what I would say is, if how can I be most valuable to the candidate? Maybe it's not writing a good letter to that department, but it's help them on the job search, if that's really the case, right? So again, that's just a way for us to rethink some of the work. And just a couple other ones, just for you to rethink this, and then we'll move on. Should you accept the paper review request? We get a lot of paper reviews. I know we all do that. Should you say yes or no? Because if you say yes, you're going to add something to your quadrant 2. Oh, that's scary. If you say no, you can't. It's going to be difficult to be a good citizen in your domain. So what I think about is which papers are fast to review. Let me give you 3 choices: really good papers, really bad papers, or the mushy middle. Which ones are super fast to review? Okay, we got a lot of really bad. I would agree really bad is really bad. I would also say to you, really good papers are really easy to review. Yeah, they're really easy because they're like, this is a good paper. Is it perfect? There's no perfect paper, but let's be real. This is good. People need to hear about this because the results are done well. The stats are good. Can I nitpick here and there? For sure, but the main gist is this paper should get accepted. Well, for me, when you think about accepting a paper review, really think not every paper is really equivalent, right? And a lot of what you can start to suss out is going to be from, let's say, the abstract, right? Because Roy, you raised a good point. So what I try to do is, what are my criteria for accepting a paper review? And for me, the things that I care the most about is supporting junior faculty, especially whenever they have really good papers that need to get in. And so I try to look through abstracts to help me find papers where I can be a champion for folks. And then I'm going to say yes to those, unlimited number of those. But if it's not them, it's going to be harder for me to just accept, just because I'm not going to be able to provide the time. All right, we're down to the last, I'd say 10 minutes, because we definitely want time for questions. Other tools that I also wanted to throw out there that I also learned from the startup space is really the idea of root cause analysis. So when you're sitting down with some of your students, and this actually came from, I find this important given to tenure to be a data discussion. I can understand that is one perspective. I do know that a lot of people still prioritize it. So, okay, so let's at least focus on this concept of root cause analysis. Because some of the things that when Lauren had sent to me, it's like, oh, mentees are not working on tasks in a timely manner. This is something that people have asked for support with, or mentees not committing to meeting schedules, or difficulty getting mentees to come into in-person meetings even when the deadlines approach. So the tool I wanted to provide people here is this concept of root cause analysis. And this is really, really critical in startups, because you have to find out like why people might or might not be using your product. It's also very important in UX design and HCI. So this is a good tool just in general. And I have a picture here of an oil stain that you might find in your garage. So imagine you back out of your garage, you back your car out of the garage, and there's an oil stain on the garage floor below you. Now, the question is, how do you solve this problem? If your answer, I think we'd all agree, if your answer is to go clean the oil spill and that's all you do, it's unlikely to solve the larger problem, right? Because there's a reason why the oil spill happened. And unless you saw somebody, like had a container of oil and they just dropped it, there's something else going on, right? Something under the car, which you should be probably paying attention to, caused the oil spill. Right. Okay. So what you need to try to figure out is what's the root cause? Like what's really causing this problem? Is it, what's going on under the car? Is it, why is oil leaking there? Is it, it's a plug that was not put on correctly because whenever you got the oil change, they did not do a proper job reattaching that, and that's going to cause problems, right? So root cause analysis is really about understanding the problem and its symptoms and identifying potential factors. And then hopefully, of course, that you identify a solution to it. And the technique I want to provide you today was something called the 5 whys. And it's as simple as you think it is. Okay, all you have to do is repeatedly ask why to explore the cause and effect. Now, there's some more nuance to this. Once you actually start going to the space of 5 whys, you start reading some stuff about it. It's really pretty cool. But I just want to think out, we can role play a little bit here. Mentees not working on tasks in a timely manner. So if a mentee that you had, somebody that you're the mentor for, your mentee just not working on tasks in a timely manner. They say they're going to get things done, they just don't. And you walk up to them and they go, hey, I'm noticing that you're not getting these things done on timely manner. Why? What do you think some of the things that they might say are? So this really, we struggle with this. I have too much going on. Okay. Okay. Busy with other things. Okay, let's focus on that one. But really, you can do this with whatever the answer is. It doesn't really matter. So busy with other things, right? Classes, work, family. Okay. So then what you do is you say, oh, okay, why is that hindering you from working on tasks in a timely manner? So again, you asked why, and then you got these potential answers. Now you're asking a second why. Why are these being busy with these other things impacting your ability to work on tasks in a timely manner? See, now it takes a little bit of thinking. I've got to kind of grind a little bit. Well, those things are more important, urgent. Okay, they took on too much. Now we're starting to get onto the real reason why these things are happening, right? So now you can ask why, again, like for example, our pizza, they took on too much. Okay, that's often why they don't have their quadrant in order. Yes, but they took on too much, right? So now you're starting to get the potential solutions. Our pizza and Rua, I would actually combine those together. They took on too much. Okay, so why? Are they having difficulty understanding what to say yes to, what to say no to? Are they struggling with, let's say, cultural norms about what's expected of them? What's going on? So what they call it 5 whys because typically it takes 5 whys until you get to the real problem, that the real root of the issue, and then you can try to design some solution with them to help them address that core idea, which might be they're struggling on which things to say yes and no to. Mine often on yes. And I think most of us did. A lot of us learned through either watching other people and things that worked for us, but for the students that we struggle with, it could be because they're struggling with that one concept. And that's really where we can provide these tools, the Eisenhower matrix, for example, to really help them, give them a framework for it, right? Another tool that I wanted to provide folks that comes very much from software engineering, but also from startup world is acceptance criteria. A lot of students, the reason why they struggle with working on things because they just don't know when they're done. Okay, so what acceptance criteria, another tool that I wanted to provide folks here is for you to talk through with students how clearly defining what done means for research tasks. Okay, that means you really want to help them establish SMART goals. I think a lot of us have heard of that. SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And it really helps us understand, helps mutual understanding between mentors and mentees. So we think about acceptance criteria. If you ask a student to do a literature review section for a paper, I think if your experience is anything like mine, they'll go off and it seems like it'll take them forever to do something like a literature review. You probably then come back every week, you meet with them and they're just like, yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And if you look at what's really going on, the root cause is oftentimes they just don't know. How do they know when they're done with a literature review? Okay. Yeah, it just, right. So this is one of the important things. This is one of the questions where whenever we talk about something with my students and they go, yeah, I'll work on that this week. I go, great. How do you know you're done? How do you know you're not? So what you should build out with them, especially when they're at the beginning, is to help write out what are your acceptance criteria. For example, look up what I do with, let's say, a literature review. You and I will come up with a set of either search terms or conferences and journals I want you to search. You're going to look through the last 3 years, come up with a list, and you're going to run that by one of my senior PhD students or my postdoc. And if they give you the thumbs up, you're done with version 1. Not perfect, but you'll be done, and then you can come back to me, and we can have a further conversation. See how good the quality is. Probably be 80% of the way there, right? What even is good enough? This is Kate. This is exactly why I think a lot of students struggle, and I want to break folks of this perfectionism, because the startup world, you never have enough resources to be perfect. You've got to release what you got so that you can get feedback on it. And people typically are so struggling with the feedback, they won't release. That's why Pomodoro, it's not about 25 minutes and you stop working. 25 minutes means you've got to release it. If you give somebody 25 minutes to work on a literature search, at the end of 25 minutes, they give you what they got. And that's a literature search. Not that they worked on a perfect literature search, they worked on a literature search for 25 minutes, and that's the best thing you can get. What are some acceptance criteria for a study design? So that's where, again, one thing I found in academia is letting people know that they can turn to other students or postdocs or other faculty, or you again. I mean, I tell my students, send it to me on Slack. I can give you feedback in like 5 minutes. That can be an acceptance criteria. So it doesn't have to be perfection. It really lets them feel a little off the hook where they don't have to come up with perfection. They can actually just go on. They can actually go, oh, my advisor and I talked about this, and they said that they'd be okay with if I did A, B, and C. I did it. I'm not going to, and it won't be perfect, but it's good enough for us to review. Right. Well, as an ACM reviewer, I think I am reviewer number 2. And so I'll take on that hateful person. That could be me. Okay, so just a recap, because we're getting to the end, and I appreciate everybody's time, and people have been so interactive on the chat. That's been fantastic. So thank you so much. Get nothing else from this talk. Reminder, make the bets small, talk often, review often. We talked about ideation. How do you make the bets small with ideation? Here's one thought that I always like to throw out there. Of your last 10 ideas, how many were any good? You can put that, you can be honest and put that in the chat. I'll lead off. Yeah, go ahead. If anybody wants to put in the chat? Of your last 10 ideas, how many were any good? Probably 2, actually. All right. Yeah. If you've ever tried to do the stats on yourself, it's actually really hard to do it because it's like, how do you track that? But the reality is, yeah, I've never seen, even the most confident person I've ever seen said like 4. But most people, I think, would agree 2 is any good. So why do we spend all our time trying to convince people that this idea is good? As opposed to, why don't we try to convince people, why don't we try to figure out which of these ideas are good? So the challenging part is it takes so long to get feedback on our idea. So the way we can help our students, and we can help ourselves many times, is to get feedback really, really quickly on your idea, right? So it usually takes so long. If you submit a proposal, it takes you, what, 3 months, 6 months, or, so I mean, I had quite a few proposals pulled because it never got reviewed this past cycle, right? I know a lot of us kind of struggled with that. Those are long cycles. Can we make it shorter? And I also want to highlight to you, we also struggle when people talk about this in academia. If you looked at my CV, and I know everybody probably has it bookmarked, but if you looked at my CV, you would probably never thought I failed. I just told you that only 2 out of my 10 ideas are any good, right? But if you looked at my CV, you only find the 20% of the papers that made it through the review cycle. Not necessarily they were good, they just made it through the review cycle. So you've got, I mean, if you just do the math, I've been doing this for a while. So I've got about 160, 170 journals, conference publications. If you multiply it by, so if you said, man, Ben's got a lot of good ideas. Like, no, Ben's also had hundreds and hundreds. So you multiply that by 4, it's 600 to 700 bad ideas that didn't work out. So we spend so much time, and our students also see that. They only see all these things that we got correct. I couldn't even recreate all the failed papers that I try to submit. I challenge anybody here to do it. Try to make a list of all your failed papers. That's actually really hard to do. Okay, so let's get to the end. So just some other tips you might also find useful. How do I let my students ideate quickly? I actually provide them an account on Prolific and Amazon Turk so that they can run groups of 10 or 20 people through a study design just to see whether their design's likely going to show anything. Okay, so you can just allow students have quick ways to find out whether their study designs won't work, and that's okay, right? One sec. Okay, feedback. How often do you give feedback? Right now, I think a lot of times people meet weekly, but can we do things on a shorter time frame? Could you meet on a more frequent basis? One thing you find out, the more frequent that you meet, the shorter the meeting time. So, anyways, all right, one sec. Sorry. Had a couple dogs that were about to get into it. So, all right. We're getting to the end. So there are other activities that there are other things that other tools. I will provide that in a handout that I'm going to send out to Lauren. But I wanted to go ahead and get to the end of the talk because we have other tools that I'm going to provide. A great book, Measure What Matters by John Doerr. I highly recommend it. And I will provide links to like the YouTube video, which is a good use of your hour. I mean, changed my life. So I really, really appreciate that. So it's key takeaways. Hopefully you use this hour to really rethink work and focus on a value delivery. You really thought about a startup mindset, which means limited resources and embracing failure with a lowercase f, not a capital case F. You learned about the Eisenhower matrix because it's something super useful. How do I do that? In my inbox, everything that comes in, is it a quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? If it's a quadrant 3 or 4, I click delete. I don't even respond. If it's a quadrant 1 or 2, I get through all my quadrant 1s for that day. In quadrant 2s, I try to spend at least an hour plus a day working towards. Time box everything through Scrum. That's a whole other talk. I'm an agile evangelist, so we can go there. Apply root cause analysis with 5 whys for when you're talking with students and you're trying to get at what's the real reason that they're really struggling. And hopefully you really think about shortening the time scale for how often you provide feedback on their ideas and how they're progressing. So I will end there. And again, thank you for your attention and your committed interaction throughout this entire talk. Hopefully you got something from this. I'm going to stop sharing there. Yep. So Lauren, I don't know whether you want me to continue talking. I see 2 questions in the Q&A. If people want to hop off, I totally understand. If you want to reach out to me and you want to further on this conversation, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to give a talk to your research group because I've done it with my research group about how to incorporate Eisenhower matrix. I'm happy to do it via Zoom. You'll find out that you'll get a quick response from me and we can get it scheduled within a week. Very, very easy. Happy to do it. Raj has a good question for the Q&A. Do you meet with each mentee one-on-one or in groups? How often do you meet with them? How do you have time to work if you're in meetings all day? That's a great question, right? And then I want to highlight that the natural inclination is to have fewer meetings and to have more space between meetings, right? Because you think that the opposite end sounds horrible, right? I actually meet all the time, and then I'm always in a meeting. Like, how can I get anything work done? What I want to throw out there is always asking yourself, hey, what's valuable here, right? I don't want to have meetings for meetings' sake. I want to have meetings because they're valuable. And at some point, you should be able to evaluate whether a meeting with your mentee, what's the value in it? Okay, so very practically, what do I do on a practical basis? I meet with all my mentees, and I have done this for I'm finishing my 23rd year here. 23 years, I met with my mentees every week. I meet with them as a large group, but I meet them one-on-one. But what I've started doing, for example, now is I'm in my office, in person, available on demand, 8:30 to 12:30, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can come on into my standing office hours. That's 4 hours, that's 12 hours a week that I'm sitting in my office, that I tell all my students, if you find it valuable to talk to me, drop on by. I'm right there. You don't have to send me a Slack message. You can just show on up. I'll be there. And I want the students to drive the value discussion for themselves, as opposed to necessarily me saying, well, it's your weekly check-in with Ben. And then they get all anxious about it, right? Even though I try to come across as a nice person, Rua can tell you, I try. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It doesn't work out. But I would want my students to be able to self-identify that, hey, at this moment, I would derive a lot of value from talking with Ben. I'm going to go drop on by, and at least I know within 2 days, I can get in front of him. I can get through this, whatever this topic is. So those important but not urgent on their dockets can get addressed. And again, back to Kate, how do you balance Pomodoro with being hyper-focused? The one comment there is, you have to remember the end of the Pomodoro time, whatever time box you do, the goal is not to stop working. The goal is to release what you've done. And so if you said, Ben, I've got if I'm telling a student, if I tell a student, hey, you've got one block of time, let's say 30 minutes to do a literature search. Yes, that's all you've got. And that means I'm only going to expect 30 minutes worth of quality. It's okay. But I want you to give your best run at what that literature search. Now, what does that mean in 30 minutes? That means typically they can just paste references in a doc. They can't really write out everything, right? But that's okay. I only want them to spend 30 minutes showing me the references and telling me their strategy that they use. I give them feedback on that. There's not really much value for me to really go through this whole long document and that they have to spend 3 weeks, 4 weeks to generate. That takes too long. So back to Kate's point, how do you balance it? The mental shift was the end of the time block is when you release. It's not when you stop. It's not just when you stop working because the timer went off. It's because you've got to release that. And that's not different than software development. Software releases happen on a regular schedule. And if you say, hey, I'm going to release the best that I got because my customers are going to get an improved experience from it, that's the same mindset that I'm trying to incorporate into academia versus this perfection mindset where you have to have the perfect literature review, which we all know doesn't exist. And it just causes our students to just grind for hours, for days, weeks sometimes. Anything else? All right, Ming, I see you have unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Ben? All right. Thank you, everybody. We still have quite a few. We still have 25 people hanging around. It was a great session, and even I have learned something new today. that was really useful, the Eisenhower matrix. Thanks. Thank you for everyone, and we'll continue with our series. And please stay, informed of what's coming up. We will be posting on the series website. Thanks again. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for attending. Okay, thanks. Okay, bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.